Rodrigo always appreciated peace and quiet. After years of living in the chaos of a busy city, he finally managed to move to a suburban house surrounded by trees and friendly neighbors. It was the perfect refuge to leave behind the noise of his past life. The house wasn't new, but it had charm. Over the months since moving in, Rodrigo had been slowly renovating it, making the space feel uniquely his. That Thursday evening began like any other. Rodrigo had endured a long day at work and was eager to relax. After dinner, he grabbed a book and settled onto his couch. Outside, the soft chirping of crickets and the occasional rustling of leaves created a calming backdrop. Around 10 p.m., he heard the first noise. It was faint, like scratching against the side of the house. At first, Rodrigo thought it was the wind moving branches against the walls. But the sound persisted, and a gnawing unease began to creep in. He set the book aside and walked to the nearest window. Peering out, he saw the familiar quiet street, illuminated by streetlights casting long, eerie shadows. Everything seemed normal. Shaking his head, he closed the window and returned to the couch, convincing himself it was nothing. Minutes later, the sound returned, louder this time. It was coming from the front door. Rodrigo stood, his heart racing. Grabbing his phone, he turned on the flashlight and cautiously approached the door. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice steady but laced with unease. The scratching stopped immediately. For a moment, silence filled the house. Then, something pounded against the door with enough force to make him jump back. Taking a deep breath to calm his nerves, Rodrigo unlocked the door and flung it open. Outside, the street was just as empty as before. The faint breeze rustled the trees, and the stillness was almost unnerving. He was about to close the door when he noticed something on the wooden floor of the porch. Deep scratches marred the wood, long and jagged, as if clawed by something with immense strength. Rodrigo knelt to examine them, his pulse quickening. He felt a chill crawl up his spine. Without hesitation, he locked the door, checked all the windows, and grabbed a kitchen knife. For a while, the house remained quiet. Rodrigo sat at the kitchen table, clutching the knife, his eyes darting between the front door and the hallway. But then the footsteps began. They came from upstairs. Rodrigo froze. He lived alone. There was no way anyone could be upstairs. Gripping the knife tightly, he grabbed his phone and tried calling the police. The call failed, the screen flashing, "No service." "This can't be real," he muttered, trying to convince himself it was all in his head. Gathering his courage, he began ascending the stairs, each step creaking under his weight. The house seemed unnaturally silent except for the occasional groan of the wooden steps. At the top of the stairs, the light in his bedroom was off. He reached for the switch, but the bulb didn't respond. Using his phone's flashlight, he illuminated the room. At first glance, everything looked as it should, but the air was frigid, far colder than the rest of the house, and a faint burnt smell lingered. Rodrigo stepped further into the room, scanning it with the beam of light. Then he saw it. In the mirror, a tall, hooded figure stood behind him. He spun around instantly, but no one was there. A scream escaped his lips as he bolted from the room. He raced down the stairs, nearly tripping, and ran to the front door. He fumbled with the lock, but it wouldn't budge. Behind him, slow, deliberate footsteps began descending the stairs. Panic surged through him as he turned and sprinted toward the back door. Miraculously, it opened with ease. Rodrigo dashed into the yard and didn't stop running until he reached his closest neighbor's house. He pounded on the door frantically until it opened. "What's going on, son?" asked Mr. Almeida, an elderly man who had lived in the neighborhood for decades. Rodrigo explained everything in a rush, his voice shaking. Mr. Almeida listened intently, his brow furrowing. "That house, it's always had something strange about it," the man said hesitantly. Rodrigo stared at him in disbelief. "The last tenants used to hear things, see shadows. Some moved out without even bothering to sell their furniture. No one knows what's in that house, but it's not normal," Mr. Almeida explained. When the police arrived, Rodrigo recounted his experience. They searched the house thoroughly but found no signs of forced entry. The windows were intact, the upstairs was empty, and nothing appeared out of place. But the claw marks on the porch were real. Rodrigo never returned to that house. Although he couldn't fully explain what had happened, he knew something was there, something that didn't belong in this world. Weeks later, while unpacking in his new apartment, Rodrigo came across the knife he had grabbed that night. To his horror, it was covered in marks, as though something impossibly sharp had scraped against it. Since then, Rodrigo lives with the unsettling feeling that something is still watching him, waiting. Want to know more about this story and many others we still have to share? Then don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Every day, a new story comes straight from our mysterious archive, filled with tales and accounts we've gathered from various sources. Cases with stories that will give you chills. Also, don't forget to share this video with that friend of yours who loves a good mystery.